Are you sick and tired of overdraft fees, late payments, and just not having any money left over at the end of the month? Well, look, it's completely possible to break that cycle. You likely need a budget. In this video, I'm gonna show you how you can just completely do away with all that additional stress by helping you put a budget in place. After implementing a budget, my wife and I were able to pay almost $60,000 in debt and build a six-figure portfolio in just 4 years. So by the end of this video, my hope is that you're gonna be a budgeting expert. And if you have any questions, just drop them below. Here's why you need a budget. Did you know only 24% of millennials demonstrate any financial literacy? And just in 2020 alone, financial literacy cost Americans more than $415 billion. The number one mistake on why people live paycheck to paycheck is not because of how much money they make. There's a lot of people who make six-figure plus incomes and still can't seem to make ends meet. And that's because it's not really how much money we make, but how much money we get to keep. The average person has credit card debt here in the US of more than $6,270. Here's another mind-blowing stat. 40% of Americans have less than $300 in savings. Only 30% of Americans have a long-term financial plan. 39% of Americans have enough cash to cover a $1,000 emergency. That's 39% only. So if they get an emergency of $1,000, they're gonna have to run to somebody for help or pull out a credit card. I mean, that's absolutely insane. And a whopping 32% of Americans have absolutely nothing saved for retirement. So anytime I'm talking about money or budgeting, there's always like these myths that people have in their head. I'd like to cover just a couple of them with you. If I had more money, all my problems would be solved. When in reality, actually just spending less than you're earning could actually solve a ton of your problems already. Myth number 2, budgeting is for people who are in debt. When in reality, budgeting can actually help you stabilize your income so you don't actually need debt. Or, like in my case, it can help you pay down debt a lot faster. Myth number 3, if you balance your checkbook, this is the guy who always has a little bit in his account, then you don't need a budget. Reality is though, that balancing your checkbook is not going to help you be financially prepared for anything that life throws at you. A budget can help you do just that. And myth number 4, that a budget is going to inhibit your freedom of choice when it comes to spending your hard-earned money. When in reality, a budget is actually going to help you spend that money the right way after you pay all of the right expenses first. Look at it this way. If you don't control your money and your finances, they will control you. So let's talk about identifying goals. Budgets work best when you tie them to a personal financial goal. To increase the likelihood that you're gonna accomplish this goal, it's important for you not only to write it down, but actually share the progress with somebody. Continue to talking to them about it. Where are you on this goal? How close you are to it? If you missed a specific deadline, it's important to keep that conversation going. A study done by Dominican University in Northern California demonstrated that 71% of people were much more likely to accomplish their goals if they share them with someone and had someone to keep them accountable. Whenever you set a goal, it's important to use the SMART principle. And it's just like this, starting with the letter S for specific. I want to build an emergency fund that is, $20,000. The second letter, M, stands for measurable, which means you need to put down goals that you can measure. Like for instance, I want to save $5,000 a year, or $433.26 per month, or $10 per day. It needs to be specific and it needs to be measurable. The third out of this acronym is the letter A. The letter A stands for achievable. If you have an income of $50,000 per year, your goal should not be for you to save $400,000 a year. That is not achievable. My recommendation is you take a look at your disposable income. So after you pay all of your expenses, take a look at how much is left over and then pick a number in that disposable income. So it should be, my recommendation is about half of whatever is disposable. So if you have $500 a month in disposable income, your achievable goal is to save half of that, or $250 per month. The fourth letter is R, which stands for relevant. You just want to make sure that your goals line up, or in this case, your budgeting goals line up almost identical to your last 90 days, 180 days of income and expenses. So keep them as relevant as possible. And last, SMART is the letter T, which stands for time bound. You need to put a clock on it. And then you'll know, like for instance, I want to save $20,000 over the course of the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it happens to be, but make sure you set a time goal to it as well. So you need to record your earnings. If you don't know exactly how much you make and you're not keeping track, you absolutely should. But why don't you grab some pay stubs or go online and look at some pay stubs, and let's start writing these down. So if you get paid a variable amount, look at the average on a weekly basis and a monthly basis for at least 3 months. It's also important to make sure that you're using your net income and not your gross income. Gross income is how much your employer says you make, right? So if you signed up for a job and they said, look, we're gonna pay you $75,000 a year, that's your gross income. Net income is when you subtract pretty much everything that the government takes. So any of your federal taxes, state taxes, even local taxes, and then you have Social Security and any other withholdings. You want that net number because you can't actually work with the gross number. You don't actually get paid that. You get paid the net number. And if you're a freelancer or you have completely inconsistent income, what you want to do is grab that 90-day average, whatever it is on the lower end. It's much better to have some additional cash left over, but budget for the worst case scenario on your lower income months, and then be pleasantly surprised if you end up with a little more income on any given month. All right, so now we get to the really interesting thing, which is tracking your expenses. In my experience, and what I hear a lot of people who are going through a budget for the first time or getting into the habit of it, is just how frustrating this can be. Because you gotta go out and find, receipts or look at your bank statements. It becomes frustrating. And here is my number one tip so that this isn't frustrating, is that you need to remove the why. Because when you're looking at these expenditures, whether it's from you or a roommate or your spouse, even if it's just you, you're gonna start asking yourself why. Like, why did I spend this? How did I spend this? Like, what's my reason behind it? Remove that. Just look at it as a number or an equation and completely take the emotional out of it so you can get through with it. So remember, throughout the process, you're just a stenographer. You're just there to write it down and take the emotional out of it. Don't question yourself. Don't try to justify it. Just write it down. If you're like most people, the majority of your income is gonna go to housing. That should be roughly 30%. If your current housing needs is more than 30% of your budget, it's going to put a strain on your entire budget. So of course, my recommendation is find a place that you can live comfortably that is less than 30%, or look for ways to increase your income. Whenever you're looking to buy a property, one of the things that the bank does is they look at your DTI, debt to income ratio, and they want you to stay in that 30 to 40% range because they know that if you get a mortgage that is more than that, it's going to put a strain on your entire budget, which is going to increase the likelihood of default and late payments, etc. So think about it. If the banks do it, there's a reason behind it. We're gonna be covering a ton of content over the next couple of minutes. If you'd like more information, more details, and you need additional help on budgeting, I created an ebook that's almost 60 pages long that, it talks about all things budgeting from A to Z, and you can check that out in the link in the description. Let's go right into the sheet that I prepared. And if you want to follow along, again, the link is in the description. So open it up and let's get right into it. All right, guys, so I pre-populated this sheet just for the sake of time, but what you're gonna do is go into File and make a copy of it so that you have it in your own Google account. And then what you're gonna do, you see that I already have allocated 50% to needs, 30% to wants, and 20% to savings. So I kind of like force this one in, just in case you want to. I think it's the healthier way to budget. I added in here person one income, and you can see here I have a hidden tab with person number two. I'm gonna go ahead and hide that again in case you are a couple. In this case, I'm gonna do an example for just one person, and that person's gross income is 50,000. So we have in here 50,000. If you have this in person number two, then this would be their income as well. And then the next column, which everything would get shifted, would be the joint income, and then it would get broken down in monthly. So here we have a person who earns $50,000. This isn't a month, it should be just income. And then you see that half of that should be going to needs, 15,000 to wants, and 10,000 to savings. I went ahead and broke this down. So you have mortgage and rent, anything that's yellow is what you would fill out. So go in and put in your mortgage and rent information, car payment, insurance, if you have any gas. I work from home, so I typically don't, but I mean, you put in, $25 in there. Groceries, I didn't put that in, but we probably spend around, this is a month, so let's do $250, I guess. Childcare, we don't have any. Gas, we don't have any. It's included. $50 is like maybe 104, 150, something like that. Taxes, I'm a W-2 employee, so it already gets pulled out. And then you can kind of go through and fill all of this out. The interesting thing is that, again, this is just person one. Person two would have their own expenses. And then you have the monthly spending here is going to give you a total. So if you have person two, then you're gonna get a total for the household, and then it's gonna multiply that by 12, as you can see here, on a yearly. So in my instance, so I'm spending $15,000 a year on mortgage or rent, or person one is actually, and then they have a car payment of $192 or $2,304. Dave Ramsey would be very upset at this. Sorry, Dave. And then, all of these other expenses. It will break down here for you your annual spending. So for needs, I am actually overspending by $3,500. So I need to find a way where my needs, so this category, needs to go down by almost $3,600. I also know that in wants, I am underspending. So I can actually spend a little more in here. And I don't have anything set aside for vacation, so you probably use that up very quickly. And then obviously, I'm not saving enough, so I can save, or I can save a little less and take this money and put it towards my needs. And then that way I don't have to move to a cheaper apartment. So, take a look, download this. Obviously you can apply it to your specific case. These are dynamically updated. So typically this is what you want it to look like. And it's got that 50% for needs, the 30% for wants, and 20 for savings. Realistically, here's how person one is spending. They're spending 65% on needs, 28% on wants, and 5.5% on saving. So obviously this budget needs a little bit of work, but go ahead and download this, start tracking this for yourself. If you need to pause the video, feel free to do so, and then you can come back once you're ready. So let's talk about prioritizing your expenses. A lot of people believe that just because a bill arrives, that they need to pay it immediately. And that's just not true. You need to prioritize your expenses so you know what needs to be paid first and what essentially can be pushed down to a later day or your next paycheck. So I've broken down the expenses into specific categories, starting with the first one, which is survival needs. So your survival needs are things you absolutely cannot live without. It's only 3 or 4 things, but these are set aside and paid for before you use your money for anything else. Your survival needs include things like shelter and security. And then of course you need to eat, so they include things like groceries. Dining out is not considered a survival need. We'll talk about that later on. Survival needs is essentially just the basics. So it includes your groceries, but it doesn't include you going out and spending at a 5-star restaurant. I would also consider survival needs, some basic level of clothing. Can't walk around and go to work naked or do your Zoom meetings completely butt naked. So you're obviously gonna need some shoes, you need socks and the underwear, and you need any type of apparel. When you actually go out and you're buying, a Gucci bag or a Louis Vuitton bag, instead of just getting a basic bag, that's a lifestyle choice, just like dining out. It's not a survival need, so make sure you don't get the two of them mixed up when you're setting up your budget. A lot of people will actually consider savings or investing as part of a survival need. And although it may not be a current survival need, because you don't need that money for savings or investing now, but later on or in the future, you're definitely going to. But you're obviously not gonna have the income when you're retired. So considering it a survival need now, I would consider it a wise choice. If you don't know how to get started, take a look at this video here. It's gonna tell you how you can start a dividend ETF portfolio with just $100. So critical wants includes things like your cell phone, your internet plan for your cell phone. It includes things like maybe transportation, which some would consider a survival need, especially if you have to, drive to work, but you can always downgrade. It also includes paying down debt that you used for survival needs and not for, the latest Air Force One sneakers. There are things in here that can always be downgraded, like your phone or your phone plan, transportation and things like that, but they're still considered critical because you still need them. Back in 2006, I had a beauty of a car. It was a Lexus GSF Sport 350, and it was black with like these black rims, a red interior. I mean, it was amazing until I became a little wiser with my money. So what happened is I actually traded it in for a 2011 Nissan Altima. And I did my research on the Altima because I was looking at like gas mileage and how much depreciation the car had and how much I could write off and all of that. And I actually ended up taking my payment from $1,000 to like $198. It was absolutely insane how much my mindset changed once I wrote down all my numbers and realized that I could have been budgeting a lot better. Critical wants tend to be a very dangerous category because people, they're ostentatious about what they want, so they will take on additional debt, just like I did, and loan for a car payment or jewelry or anything that's excessive. And just because it's a critical want, it doesn't justify you getting into a loan or running your card on something you can't afford. So just be very cautious about this category. And right next to critical wants is lifestyle choices. These are things that people consider so much, but they don't really have a lot of direct impact on your day-to-day living. This is essentially, the neighborhood that you choose to live in. It's a lifestyle choice. And even if you have a child, I'm almost positive that anywhere in the country, you can probably find a fairly decent neighborhood that is least expensive or less expensive to say it better. And the price is actually a lot better. Just to give you one example, these are things that you can substitute, but you are choosing to make this lifestyle decision to be in that neighborhood and attend that specific school and drive that specific car. This is where you see your neighbor and he has this specific upgrade to his house, and now you decide it becomes a critical want when it really isn't. So just like critical wants, this is a very dangerous category because it has very little impact and no impact on our lives, but it actually provides a lot of anxiety and a sense of inadequacy. And now we have trivial wants, which is things that you don't really need on a day-to-day basis, but it would be almost nice to have. Those are things like maybe going out to the movies, or you don't do it on a daily basis, maybe not even on a weekly basis. It's more of a maybe monthly. For me nowadays, I rarely go to the movies with my wife, and even when we watch a movie at home, it's always with a lamp jumping on top of an eye. So this is one of the things that, at least on the movie side, we just don't have a budget for this. So long-term wishes are things like starting a college fund for your kids, or even opening a new business, or maybe even putting money aside for a specific vacation. Here's the interesting thing about long-term wants and trivial needs. They don't actually have a direct impact on your day-to-day living, but what happens is they do have a toll on your emotional state. So I'll give you an example. If you work extremely hard and you never take some time to be with your family, to have a vacation, to let yourself want anything, because you don't even allow yourself to have a $5 cup of Starbucks coffee, that's gonna have an effect on your emotional state, which can then affect everything else. So it's one of those things that you need to find some balance for, and if you need to do without them for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, do that. But I definitely recommend you find a way in your budget where you can work these things in. What I notice with most people is that having these long-term wishes fulfilled or en route to being fulfilled will provide emotional and mental boost that will give you, the energy and the willpower to go on and go back to the daily grind. All right, so here are 3 easy ways that you can budget. The first one, obviously, we went over earlier, and that's using Google Sheets. I already told you that this sheet is free. You can download it, you can use it. Google Sheets is amazing because if you have 2 people, for instance, you can easily share the link to it. You can use it on your phone, you can use it on the go. It's not very complex, and I already have all of the equations built in for you. It's just really one of the things you need to start using right away. My recommendation is just create a different tab for each month, and maybe at the end of each year, you kind of archive that sheet, create a new one, and save it in a budgeting folder in your Google Drive. So the second app is a lot better than Google Sheets. I have used them for a long time. It's called Wave. Wave is completely free. They do have some paid aspects of it, but it's completely free. It's an automated way where you can do budgeting, cash flow analysis, reconciliations. It is an extremely powerful accounting software. A lot of people will call it like maybe even like a QuickBooks except QuickBooks is obviously paid. And one of the biggest drawbacks, at least that I experienced between Wave and QuickBooks, is that QuickBooks, you need a different account for every business. And for me personally, I have a lot of different projects that I wanted specific cash flow analysis for. Like even my personal life, I kind of have a drop down under one Wave account, and I can kind of see the breakdown of my personal life and then my business and any of my other side hustles or projects completely independent, and all of it free. Whereas QuickBooks, you need to have a paid account for each one of those projects. So I find it completely unnecessary. Wave also has a really cool business side of it where you can send estimates, turn the estimates into invoices, have recurring billing, and there's even banking now. So if you want to check them out, the link is in the description. And the last one, this is my favorite, and this is the one I actually use. It's called Trubill. I came across Trubill a couple of months ago, and because I'm a UI UX junkie, I love a good presentation of an app or a website. I signed up right away, and I realized how easy this was to use. It shows the logos for my Spotify subscriptions, which is just something that is very pleasing aesthetically, but it also actually does a very good job of tracking your net worth. It does a great job because I can actually share it with my wife, and we link both of our accounts. I was able to link my investment accounts, and I can track my net worth, like I said there. It also gives me reminders. It'll negotiate lower subscription fees for me. I mean, this app is amazing. They're not sponsoring this video, believe it or not. I just really like them. The reason I mentioned this app for last is because it's not free. But here's a way you can save some money. If you sign up for the subscription and then you go to cancel, it'll actually ask you, how much do you think the app is worth paying? So I think they started at $6 or $7, and you can pull it all the way down to only $3 a month. So for $36 a year, you can essentially have your budgeting, as autonomous as possible, and still get one of the best budgeting apps I've ever come across. All right, so now we get to the actionable insights. So now that you know exactly how much you make, what your expenses are on a month-to-month basis, now it's just simple math. It's estimated that roughly 70% of Americans live within their means. Better translated, paycheck to paycheck, which means any financial bump would completely send people into a tailspin. So what you want to do is look at your budget. You need to trim anything that's in excess, and you need to look for ways to increase your income. One of my favorite books is called Atomic Habit, and it is completely unrelated to money, but it can definitely be applied here, where these microscopic percentages, whether you're increasing a good behavior or decreasing a bad behavior, can have massive impacts and create drastic change. So think about it from your finance perspective. So let's assume you have a budget to spend of $500 a month, and you only decrease that by 1%. Well, instead of you spending $500, you spend $495, which is, come on, $5 less is definitely doable. And then the following month, you drop that by another 1%. So you drop it by $4.95. At the end of the year, you can actually take those percentages and invest them. So if you drop the 1% per year, 12% for that year, you put that 12% into some index fund, and your future self will be thanking you for it because you started with just 1%. All right, guys, that's the end of this video. I'd like to tell you about a resource that I created. It is the ultimate guide to budgeting. It's pretty much an all-in-one A to Z book, almost 60 pages long of all things budgeting. If you want to check that out, take a look at the description below. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Obviously, I love connecting with people. I love helping people. Make sure you're following me on Twitter and Instagram, where I post daily. Appreciate you guys, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.